From the nation's capital, the Conservative Caucus presents Conservative Roundtable, an in-depth look at today's most important issues.
Welcome to Conservative Roundtable. I'm Howard Phillips, Chairman of the Conservative Caucus, which sponsors these broadcasts. We're very pleased to have as our guest for this broadcast Dr. Steve Camarola, who's Research Director for the Center for Immigration Studies in Washington, D.C. Dr. Camarota's Ph.D. is from the University of Virginia in Public Policy Analysis. Previously, he obtained a master's degree in political science from the University of Pennsylvania. He has frequently appeared on television, radio, and on the op-ed pages of America's newspapers. And let's get right into it, Dr. Camarota. What's wrong and right with the immigration policies of the United States today?
Well, I think we have a lot of problems. Obviously, the law is largely not being enforced, and that's encouraging widespread...
Which law?
Virtually all of the laws surrounding U.S. immigration are enforced in a very haphazard and laxed way, whether it is how we police our borders, what we do with employers who hire illegal aliens, how we process applications for green cards or citizenship, how we handle whenever a person gets a job and they send in and they provide a false social security number and a false name. How the government handles that is to just accept it. Even if it doesn't match anything in their records, they just continue to allow that person to work in the United States. There are problems overseas at our consulates in how we issue, say, temporary visas to guest workers and students. There, we're not doing as good a job as we could in terms of vetting people, but we're also allowing in people who are very likely, in many cases, to overstay their temporary visas. So at this point, we probably have about 10 million illegal aliens in the United States. About 3 million of them didn't sneak into the United States. We actually let them in, and then they just didn't honor the terms of their visa and just never went home.
And of course, not everybody sneaks across the border, as you've just pointed out. I think it's about, 35% come in through our airports. And there are others who are students at our universities who may overstay. There are people who come as tourists who may overstay. There are people who may come for a limited term but overstay. How does one become a legal immigrant to the United States? Who should be a legal immigrant? Who is a legal immigrant?
Well, there are four main categories of who becomes a legal immigrant. It's also referred to as getting a green card, even though the card itself is no longer green. When people say how many green cards we give out, that's what they mean. That's lawful permanent residency. It means you can stay as long as you like, and within a few years can become a citizen if you choose. There are four main categories. One is family-based immigration. That includes the spouses and minor children and parents of U.S. citizens, as well as their brothers and sisters, and adult children, married and unmarried.
That's popularly known as chain immigration.
Right, because if you were to come to America, obtain citizenship, sponsor your brother, he would come, but he would bring his wife. And so then that creates another family unit that then she then could sponsor her in-laws and so forth. So,
and of course, even if you're an illegal immigrant, if you give birth to a child on U.S. territory, that child is a citizen.
Right,
correct?
That's referred to as birthright citizenship, yes.
And by virtue of the birthright citizenship, can the illegal alien relative also acquire citizenship?
Well, the practical effect is that it becomes much more difficult to send that person home, because then you can say you were creating a hardship for a U.S. citizen, and that can sometimes be grounds for suspension of a deportation proceeding. So the children born to illegal aliens in the United States vastly complicate enforcement. Now, eventually, the illegal alien, the child of the illegal alien, when he grows to adulthood, yes, then can conceivably sponsor the parent because he's a U.S. citizen or she's a U.S. citizen, and they can then bring in their parents. Now, in addition to family-based immigration, believe it or not, we actually run a lottery where people mail in a postcard, and then we draw their name out of a hat.
From anywhere?
It's confined mostly to countries in Europe, the Middle East, and Africa, and some Latin American countries, places that we don't get a lot of immigrants from. And I should point out, it's now done online. It was, until a few years ago, an actual postcard you mailed in. In addition to that system, we also have what's called humanitarian-based immigration. These are refugees, which are people that we find in other countries and bring in, and people who are asylees, people who make it into the United States, often illegally, and then say, look, I can't go home because I face persecution. And so that's humanitarian immigration. So you have family, you have the lottery, you have humanitarian immigration, and then finally what's called employment or business-based immigration. These are individuals who presumably have an employer to sponsor them or are thought to be in possession of some specialized skill. Now, analysis of those individuals does not imply that they're all Einsteins or geniuses. In fact, they're pretty average. But nonetheless, that's another category. Now, in addition to that, the United States has a whole alphabet soup, which I won't go into here, of temporary visas, everything for fashion models to journalists to cultural exchange. Temporary visitors might also include not just tourists, but foreign students and a whole variety of guest workers and trainees, plus, in many cases, but not always, their spouses and children as well. So that's a huge number. They're actually, believe it or not, in government parlance called non-immigrants, even though they stay here a long time, and they are a big source of illegal immigration because often they don't go home when they're supposed to.
When my grandparents came to the United States, they had, in the early part of the 20th century, they had to have a sponsor. It had to be made clear that they would not be economically dependent on the community. They had to have no criminal record. There had to be no morals problem. And there were some other factors as well. Does that kind of qualification or disqualification still apply?
Well, the short answer is yes and no. If we know someone has a criminal record in their home country, then we usually would not grant them. If they've committed a crime here, as well, we usually would not. We're not supposed to give them a green card. Now, establishing identity is sometimes difficult. A person could use a false identity, and then that was one way to get around that. In general, individuals are not supposed to become dependent on the state in any way, and that their sponsor, the spouse or other relative who said they would bring them in, is supposed to provide support for them. And also laws, there are various laws on the books to prevent illegals from using, legal immigrants from using certain services. But the problem is that as a practical matter, it's very difficult to prevent. If you actually did become dependent on welfare, the idea that the Immigration Service would actually find you, begin proceedings against you, and actually make you leave the country just doesn't happen. There's certainly just a handful of such cases ever.
Now, until recently at least, if you were a sodomite, that was regarded as evidence of criminal conduct, and homosexuality was a disqualification. I know this was a matter of debate in recent years. What's the current status of that?
Yeah, whether someone's homosexual or not is generally not taken into account.
But it was at one time.
Yes, I believe it was at one time. It hasn't been part of U.S. immigration law. The bigger, I think, the many concerns are that as the law currently reads, it's very difficult, even if someone explicitly is someone who hates America, if someone organizes Death to America rallies in their home country, trying to bar that person when they want to come to the United States is very difficult. Now, usually we wouldn't know this, but if we are aware of this person as sort of avowedly anti-American, the mere fact that they chant Death to America and distribute bin Laden tapes or organize American flag burnings is not grounds for excluding them from the United States.
What about ill health or contagious disease? What if someone is infected with AIDS, has Kaposi sarcoma? Would that be a disqualification?
It can be. There are a number of things. But one of the problems we face, as often, and in the past we've been doing this a lot now, is processing applications from within the United States. Someone is here on a temporary visa, for example, then they apply for a green card. Because we don't make them go home, what happens is if the answer is no, because they don't qualify, they just stay anyway. So that's one of the many problems. Because the system is so lax, we actually have a vetting system that's meaningless because we process the application while you're here. And so when we say no, you just stay.
How does one become a student at an American university while being a citizen of another country?
Yes, there's the foreign student visa system, which is basically that you get accepted by an American university, and then you have to get that university provide you with the documentation, and in cooperation with the local consulate,
so it's that simple. All you need is a university sponsor.
Yes, basically that's it. That you have to have the university accept you, which is a problem because we actually, believe it or not, allow a dog training school and hairdresser schools to sponsor foreign students.
So we really have open borders in more ways than one.
Well, what we've certainly done is delegated important parts of our immigration system to people who have no incentive whatsoever to ensure the integrity of the process or the safety of the public, and rather they're just looking to bring in foreign students. And unfortunately, that is one avenue by which people enter the United States with the explicit intent of just staying illegally.
Dr. Camarota, we're going to take a break. When we come back, I'd like you to explain dual citizenship and talk about the countries which permit you to be a citizen of their country as well as a citizen of the United States. Please stay with us. These and other issues are on the agenda. One of the top leaders in the Communist Chinese military declared that the United States is the main enemy of the Central Committee of the Communist Party of the People's Republic of China, which is longhand for what we call China. We have been building up our enemy, if that is a reciprocal term, by giving them most favored nation status and membership in the World Trade Organization. Last year alone, that gave them an $84 billion advantage in money which is fungible. And as a result of the extra money they have, they're not only taking jobs from the United States, they're increasing their military budget by 17% a year. It's time to stop sending technology and dollars to Communist China.
The Conservative Caucus, www.conservativeusa.org or 703-938-9626.
Face the Truth is a production of the Conservative Caucus and is seen twice monthly on the station you are watching. We will be interviewing the movers and shakers of the pro-life movement. We hope to educate and even inspire you about what is being done in our country to protect and to promote the sanctity of life. Please watch us.
Don't miss Face the Truth with Stephen Peruka and Conservative Roundtable with Howard Phillips right here on this station every week.
Here's how you can become a citizen lobbyist and influence how your representatives vote. Write a letter to your congressmen and senators. Speak out on a call-in talk radio program. Write a letter to the editor of your local newspaper and call the Conservative Caucus for more information at 703-938-9626.
Help the Arbor Day Foundation plant more trees across the nation. Plant a tree today for all the world to share.
Go to arborday.org.
Everyone's telling me how I should feel. It's not like I planned to get pregnant. Not now. When I got pregnant and didn't want to be, I was shocked and scared and so lonely. People telling me how to feel, what to do, and not sticking around when it really counts. So now, it's all up to me. But abortion, not me. I'm having a baby, and I can't run away from that. We'll make it. Yeah, we'll make it just fine.
I am the port in the storm.
I am the line in the sand.
I am the enforcer of the sea.
The United States Coast Guard, see you and prepare your borders.
We are the defenders of the homeland. We are the shield of freedom. We are the United States Coast Guard.
Heed your country's call. Join the Coast Guard or Coast Guard Reserve.
Welcome back. I'm Howard Phillips, and our guest is Dr. Steve Camarola of the Center for Immigration Studies. And we were chatting just before the break about dual citizenship. Now, I know explicitly you can be a citizen of Ireland in the United States, you can be a citizen of Israel in the United States. What other countries present that as an advantage?
Well, in fact, believe it or not, almost every country, or most countries now, allow it in one form or another. And what happens basically is this issue comes to the fore because we have so many immigrants. About 35 million foreign-born people now live in our country. It's an all-time record. Even in 1910, it was only
35 million were born elsewhere.
Yes, they were not U.S. citizens at birth. That does not include people who were born abroad of American parents. This is the foreign-born population. Of that 35 million, roughly 10 million are probably illegal aliens. So roughly a quarter of the foreign-born are illegal aliens. In any event, what happens is you become an American citizen after you get your green card, and then you wait a period of time, you take the test, and become an American citizen. But at that point, unless you've actually renounced the citizenship of your prior country with them, and they've accepted that, you still retain your prior citizenship.
Even though when you take the oath of citizenship to the United States, you pledge to forswear all other allegiances.
Yes, the oath of citizenship explicitly says that I renounce all other allegiance to every state and so forth. But it's not meaningful. On the day that you swear in as a citizen, you could simply leave the INS facility and walk across the street to your consulate and get a passport from your home country and continue to enjoy that citizenship as well.
You probably saw the article in the New York Times the week before the 2004 election, in which it was noted that there are 100,000 Israelis eligible to vote in the U.S. presidential election. And it was asserted in the article that all they needed was either a U.S. Social Security number or an American address, which could be referenced in the vote. And if this is true in Israel, it's probably true in other countries as well. Can you shed any light on this?
Well, in that context, that would be, I'm not sure what they're referring to. It may be that there are obviously millions of Americans who live in other countries. These are American citizens. If they secure an absentee ballot, then they can vote as well.
This made particular reference to people who had never even been in the United States. Some of them had been.
Oh, okay.
Some of
these
them
are
were
individuals, right.
But these were, the article focused on people who were Israeli citizens and had never even been in the U.S. but had some relational connection with the United States.
The way it works is that we have a notion of citizenship that is based on two principles. One is, if you're born in the United States, regardless of the legal status of your parents, you're an American citizen. But if you are born in another country to an American citizen parent, father or mother, and that birth is duly recorded at the consulate, you then get American citizenship. So what you have is Americans living in Canada or Israel or Europe or anywhere else. They have children. That child never sets foot in the United States, may not even speak English.
Right.
But that child, if the parents go through the paperwork, would automatically have citizenship. And that child's children will have American citizenship. Now, there is a few limits on that, but basically there are now, and there will continue to grow unless we change the law, a growing number of Americans, or kind of American, who has no real connection to the United States. That's right.
What have been the major changes in American immigration policy, and when did those changes occur?
Well, prior to the 1920s, we had, though not absolutely, largely unrestricted immigration. World War I and then restrictive legislation in the 20s reduced immigration dramatically. And I think, first off, that's an important point. Those restrictions I think you could criticize them, because what they intentionally did was basically only allow Northern European countries and dramatically reduced Eastern and Southern European countries.
And the theory was, we want more people like us. Was that the argument? And we don't want people...
We were getting too many Italians, it was thought. Or
we don't want people who aren't like us, who don't fit the image of who we are, or what we'd like to be.
It was Catholic, it was Jewish, it was Eastern European, it was Italian, and this was seen as problematic, and there was sort of a sense that these enclaves were becoming very insular and so forth. So we dramatically reduced immigration by mainly favoring the Northern European countries, where not that many people wanted to come at that point. What happened after that was that after World War II, we took in a lot of people who were displaced by the war, but largely for about half a century or almost 60 years, immigration levels were relatively low. What that did do, even if the motives were hardly exemplary, it did greatly facilitate the assimilation of the enormous numbers of people that we had admitted prior to 1940. What
happened in the 60s?
The 60s, as part of the civil rights movement, we changed the law and no longer favored one group of countries over another, and basically said that the primary basis to come to America is if you have a relative here. That fact, coupled with some other things, fundamentally changed U.S. immigration, where, of course, prior to 1965, it had been mostly European, but with a very strong growing share from Latin America. After 65, East Asia and then later on South Asia become much bigger sending regions as well.
We just have a minute left, so we can only scratch the surface. What has President Bush proposed?
Well, unfortunately, the president essentially has proposed a guest worker program that would take all the illegal aliens here and grant them amnesty. That is, they don't have to go home. They don't have to abide by the law. The law will be changed to accommodate them, and they will become, in effect, guest workers who presumably are supposed to go home after some undetermined time. Now, why they would do that is unclear, since they're not going home now, and he doesn't talk about a dramatic increase in enforcement to make them go home. It's not even clear why they would be foolish enough to sign up for this thing, because why would you give the government your name, fingerprints, photograph, and address if you're ultimately going to have to go home, and you might not want to do that? You're already here working, and the president has been very resistive to any effort to enforce the law.
So this could be seen by some as a giant sting operation.
Well, it could conceivably be a kind of exit amnesty. Yeah. Basically, well, we'll let you be a guest worker, but then you got to go. But since the president isn't talking at all about enforcement, since the president thinks that illegal alien labor is helpful to the U.S. economy, even though there's a lot of evidence to the contrary, so it's not clear that he would ever make them go home. The other problem is that it's probably drawing in even more people in illegally. And perhaps even worse still is that we don't have the administrative capacity to weed out the bad guys when we process these guest worker amnesties. We had an amnesty in '86. One of the people we gave amnesty to was Mahmoud Abu Halima, who was one of the leaders of the 1993 attack on the Trade Center. He gets his amnesty, then he can travel abroad, go to Afghanistan, get the terrorist training that he comes back and uses in the '93 attack. Now, what's important about that fact is he got his amnesty as an agricultural worker, even though he was a cab driver in New York, because the system was so overwhelmed by all those applications that we couldn't even establish identities, we couldn't weed out the bad guys. That's exactly what would happen now as well. The administrative capacity of the system couldn't even handle what the president is proposing.
When we come back after this final break, I'm going to see what you can tell us about illegal aliens voting in the most recent presidential election and other elections. Please stay with us.
Face the Truth is a production of the Conservative Caucus and is seen twice monthly on the station you are watching. We will be interviewing the movers and shakers of the pro-life movement. We hope to educate and even inspire you about what is being done in our country to protect and to promote the sanctity of life. Please watch us.
Don't miss Face the Truth with Stephen Peruka and Conservative Roundtable with Howard Phillips right here on this station every week.
The very first clause in the Constitution, Article 1, Section 1, immediately following the preamble, asserts that all legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States consisting of a Senate and a House of Representatives. All legislative powers, that means you cannot give other entities the power to legislate, not the United Nations or the World Bank or the International Monetary Fund or the federal judiciary or regulatory agencies or federally funded private organizations. If you're going to stick to the Constitution, only the Congress can make policy, and the Conservative Caucus works to assure that Congress will more nearly conform to the Constitution.
The Conservative Caucus, www.conservativeusa.org, 703-938-9626.
Welcome back. If you want more information about Dr. Camarota, Stephen Camarota, and the Center for Immigration Studies, how do they contact you?
Well, they can visit our website, CIS.org, like Center for Immigration Studies.org, and all of our publications are available there free of charge.
And if you're interested in the work of the Conservative Caucus, which sponsors this program, www.conservativeusa.org, fax 703-281-4108. Give us your name, address, contact information. We'll send you information. Or the Conservative Caucus, Vienna, Virginia, 22180. Dr. Camarota, what about the political impact? What effect did the presence of illegal aliens in the United States have on the 2004 elections?
Yeah, we can't say how many have voted. There's not a good system in place to prevent it from happening, so if illegal aliens want to vote, they probably can, though it is against the law.
If they have a driver's license, that's evidence.
That would be one avenue, but you don't need a driver's license to vote as it is. And we don't have systems in place to prevent that. But the other thing to keep in mind is that illegal aliens were counted in the census, so that, in fact, congressional seats are awarded to states, and thus so are electoral votes.
You've got about 675,000 people in an average congressional district. So if you have a large presence of illegal aliens and they fill out the census form, it means that that is attributed to the size of the area. Right. And so you could have a seat in Congress where you had 675,000 people, of whom fewer than a majority were citizens of the U.S.
That's right. We've estimated, and you can get this at our website, CIS.org, that about 4 congressional seats were explicitly redistributed by the roughly 7 million illegal aliens who filled out their census forms. Mainly it's California. California has several more congressional seats and the electoral votes in this last election because of illegal aliens. And roughly a dozen seats.
So that can affect whether a Democrat or Republican wins.
That's right.
Or Constitution Party or whoever.
Or whoever. And in addition to that, there are about a dozen seats were redistributed from low immigration states to high immigration states because of the presence of non-citizens.
Dr. Camarota, keep up the good work. Thank you so much for the excellent information. Thank you for watching Conservative Roundtable.